All right, folks, welcome to So Sound Studio. My name is Ed, and we're going to be looking at the 5 absolute best habits to start building as you first start using the software Ableton Live for music production. All right, so the first thing that we're going to see here, this is very close to what you'll see when you open up your version of Ableton. There might be some slight differences, but this is called the arrangement or session view. And the first tip that we're going to be incorporating is we have to learn hotkeys, okay? Whenever you're learning any new software, the name of the game is to become as proficient as possible in as little as time as possible. And hotkeys are the thing that are going to save you the most time added up over the years that you're going to use this software, okay? So first things first, this is the session view. And to get to the other view of Ableton, this is called the clip view. And the way that we access it is we press tab, okay? Tab will switch us between the session view or arrangement view and the clip view. So they're slightly different. Here there's no timeline, and we're going to get into the specifics of the clip view in a later video, but just so you know, this is something that we could use for quick idea generation, and we'll show you that later. Come back to the next video for sure. But this is the essential view where we actually build our tracks, and we see a timeline on the bottom that displays obviously the chronology of the song or wherever we are in space and time. So tip number 1, learn your hotkeys. Number 2, label your tracks, okay? These are not going to be the most glamorous tips, but these are the ones that are going to set the foundation for you to become the most proficient Ableton Live user you will be in the future. If I can go back in time and I could just recommend myself to learn a couple of these are the things that I would teach myself, okay? And I've been using Ableton for over 10 years, all right? So there are 3 types of tracks that we can create in Ableton, and we're going to go over the first 2 today. So to create a new track, we're going to press Control or Command and then the letter T, all right? I've been calling the T a number so many times. I had to re-record this. Jesus Christ. Once we create a new track, there's not going to be anything on it, and there might be a different name. It's probably going to say 01 audio for you, but the reason is because I changed mine and edited it. What we first want to do is decide what's going to go on this track. So for this one, let's say I'm going to go into my samples, and I'm going to just select the random kick. We are learning hotkeys. We're going to just duplicate this kick on the beat a couple times. The way that I'm doing this, I'm holding Control and just dragging the waveform. What you see right here, this is a measure of amplitude of the signal, and that's called a waveform, and I'm just dragging it out, and that's one way to copy things. The other way is I select everything right here, including the track's name, right? I included that track's name in my selection, and then I press Control or Command D, and that'll duplicate the entire selection over in time. So now let's just play that back. We've got a pretty simple 4 on the floor. I mean, it doesn't get any more basic than this. In case we wanted to work on this area of music, we would just highlight this. Doesn't matter if you select the name right here for these purposes. And we're going to say, let's loop this, right? We're going to press Control or Command and the letter L. All right, so now all of a sudden, as you can notice, we have a yellow mark right here. This is the loop function, so you can obviously either just click that, or you could press Control or Command L, which is much faster. So as you can see, these 2 goalposts, if you would, are now honed in on the section that we've selected. So if we just play it through right now, we're going to have an infinite loop of a 4 on the floor. And here on top of this, we could record new ideas. But before we do that, now that we've decided that this track, this audio track right here, is going to be our kick drum track, we're going to rename it. So we're going to go right over here where it says New Track, and to rename it, we're going to press Control or Command R. And that's going to give us an ability to rename this. So let's just call it Kick, baby. Look at us, baby. We're already at lesson number 3. By the way, have you subscribed yet? Because this is a brand new channel, and your support will go a long way to help this channel out. Let's do it. There's going to be more tips and tricks. There's going to be cool sound design things. We're going to go through entire mixes. We're going to go through breakdowns. We're going to go through the philosophy of the songwriting process. There's going to be no limit to how much music we're going to cover. And if you love that, if you're as passionate as I am about music, let's get it together, baby. Let's hang out. Like, subscribe, do your thing. Let's do this. So the next thing, we're going to color code our tracks, right? What I want to kind of get through to you here is that don't copy my color scheme, but I want you to create a color scheme that's going to work for you, okay? Something that's completely specific to you, and I want you to use that synesthesia that you sometimes have when you listen to music. Whenever you've seen colors, when you've heard certain sounds, I want you to try to like pinpoint that, because the whole purpose of this is to grease the wheels of efficiency for future you. This is not for you now, this is for you in the future. So when you in the future reopen this project file 5 years later and you want to check out, oh wait, what was I doing here? immediately with all the colors, you're going to see and have a sense of what this track either needs or already has, or both, right? So what we do is we're going to right click on the track name, and there's this color wheel, this beautiful little color wheel that appears. For me, kicks are orange. Don't ask me why, I could get into it, but let's just say for me, they're orange. Now, if you notice something, I just selected orange, but only the track label itself changed. The recorded or dragged on samples that we brought in earlier have not actually changed their color at all. So what we're going to do is, right underneath the color wheel, we're going to right click again on the track name. There's an assigned track color to clips. These things right here, they're the clips, and boom. Now we're all golden, everything's copacetic, everything's orange, we're feeling good, baby. We're getting it, let's go, let's keep going. Tip number 4, create default tracks. Okay, so default tracks are pretty simple. There are, let's say, 2 main types of tracks that we're going to be working with within Ableton Live. The first is an audio track, which is what we've just created. And the second will be a MIDI track. MIDI tracks don't carry an audio signal unless you put an instrument on them, but they have note values assigned to them on a scale of 0 to 127. So every time we press Control T, or what is it? Control Shift T for a MIDI clip, you will have a default track that we are used to seeing. But not only that, it'll always open up with a specific plugin selection of your choice. Now, you don't have to copy my selection for plugins here. The whole purpose of this is I'll give you a baseline to work off of, and I'll give you 3 plugins, well actually technically just 2 plugins that I want you to be using every time you open up a new track. And for me, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go into our search bar right over here. It's the very handy thing in Ableton, and we will just search for utility. Now, because we are in this samples area, nothing is going to come out, right? So if we wanted to just go through literally everything, we would select the all results here, and anytime we type anything, as long as Ableton has access to it, it will spit it out along with all the other stuff that you might not be looking for. But what we're looking for right now is something called an audio effect, called a utility. Now, utility, much like its name, is kind of like the janitor of Ableton, okay? So we all need janitors, baby. Think of utility as our essential worker, okay? If there's ever another pandemic, utility is here to stay, and they will always be making the good bucks, all right? So a utility has a couple of awesome features, so we'll go over them right now. We can isolate the phase, we'll go over that in a later lesson. We can change the stereo image from left to stereo to right, or swapping the channels. We could even change the whole thing to mono if we wanted to. We could increase the width of the track, right? Very super useful, crucial for mixing. We could make just the bass mono and then select where that cutoff is, and you can listen to it here, right? So there's a bunch of incredible things that you can do. And whenever you are confused about a plugin, take your eyes and just bring them right over here to the left. Everything that you are looking for is likely going to be answered in this bottom left little tooltip area. One of the most important features here is the gain. The way that you need to think about tracks within Ableton is signal flow works from left to right. Now, why do we have a utility up front? A signal path is as if we're just reading the English language. This first utility is only going to be used for the gain in my practice. So why do we have this initial utility here? Well, simple. If we recorded our input, whatever, our microphone or a guitar slightly too low, maybe at the source, right? We dial the guitar volume knob too low, or we dial the input knob too low on our mic. This can give us some clean gain to compensate for those things. The common belief amongst most engineers, I think the consensus is that plugins function in their optimal range between -12 and -18 dBFF. Whenever we are wanting to push a plugin, if our input volume is too low, then it's not going to get us the results that we want, right? So this is a great way, in conjunction with a VU meter, volume unit meter, right after this, will be a great way for you to gauge what the volume is at this particular point to the right of this utility plugin in the future. Now, we're going to bring in an EQ8, which is an excellent EQ. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles that you might get from a third-party software, like my personal favorite, which is FabFilter Pro Q3. I know I'm not unique by any means, loving FabFilter Pro Q. By the way, EQ8 is used by Skrillex, okay? So if it's good enough for Skrillex, it's good enough for anybody. The beautiful thing about sticking to Ableton stock plugins, though, the latency, okay? You are not going to get better within Ableton than using Ableton stock plugins. By the way, I don't think you could use Ableton plugins anywhere else. Ableton is the reigning champ. of plugins. Later on in the mixing phase, if you're ever experiencing dropouts, clicks, pops, unwanted sounds, it's usually because your CPU in the top right corner here, this little percentage, is approaching max, or it's throttling up to the highest amount. And you want to try to avoid that. And the way to do that is build good habits and sticking with Ableton stock plugins as much as you could. So that's the second in our plugin chain. And what are we going to do for the third one? We're going to take Control-C, or Command-C, and we're going to copy and paste one more utility. Now, the way I just did that, you could either just Control and drag, Command drag, or you could just Control-C and Control to the right of this EQ. Now, this utility is different from the first because it's the last in the chain. It's imperative to get into this good habit as early as possible. This one is where I would control the mono, the width, right? Because this is like after it goes through the entire other signal chain of all the other plugins we're going to add to this. And we are going to automate any kind of volume automation onto this final plugin in our signal chain. The reason that we do this is because, let's say I wanted to create this silly curve right here, and the way that I did that, I just clicked on the gain, and then I have the pencil tool enabled here, which hotkey is B for the pencil, and then I just colored in what I like. The reason this is off is because I clicked on there, and I shouldn't have. You could right click on any parameter that you want to enable automation, and then re-enable the automation there. So now as you see, it's red here. That means the automation is live and functioning. We could take a listen. Yeah. Yep, you hear that? So it's working. Now, the reason that we did this here on the gain of the utility knob, you might say to yourself, Ed, there's a volume fader, right, on each track. Why are we creating a whole nother utility to put volume automation on? Very simple. Let me show you why. If we were to just go over here, which is a habit that I've gotten into, and I had to unlearn this habit over 15 years. That's why I'm so excited to make this video for y'all. You need to learn these habits early on, and I wish somebody taught me this when I was starting out. So say I wanted to automate this volume right here on the actual track fader, right, on the channel fader. Track and channel fader are interchangeable terms, by the way, here. So say we just automated there, and say I'm in the final mixing process, right? So we're gonna hit tab here, and by the way, I didn't have these views enabled. In the bottom right over here, right over my head, are all these options for you. So if you're missing something from your UI, this is where you want to look, right over here first. So here, down here, we see the quintessential kind of like channel faders as they were. These are Ableton Live's channel faders if this was a mixing desk, like you've seen images of right here. Anything that you see have a little red dot, that means there's automation already saved on that parameter. Now, this is on the actual track fader as we just did. So if we press tab again, we go back to this view. That's this red line. It's not this utilities red line. That's not going to appear there. That's a separate thing. So what we do is, if in case we're in the final mixing process and say I wanted to bring down this entire track, but with keeping all the automation that I've already programmed into it, if I were to do this in the final mixing stage, notice how this goes gray here. That's right. That sucks. That means that it is no longer active and it's not being read. It's inactive at this point. We've decreased the volume, but we have lost our automation at this point. So how do we actually correct this? There's a silly workaround that I would do if I turn off the pen tool and I was too lazy to create a utility myself. I would just right-click, re-enable the automation, and then right-click outside of those bounds, and then do something like select it all and then drag it all down. See how it's all going down together or up and retaining all the values? This is an alternative to this method, but this is a bad habit to get into. You just don't want to, because it's just a pain in the booty. All right, we're trying to avoid pains in the booties here, all right? So we're not going to be doing this anymore. So that's why you always leave a note. Innocent man would still have his arm. You label your tracks, you color code your tracks, and you never automate your volume on your track fader, okay? If you can help it, all right? And I know that you can. I know that you can, Timmy. I know that you can do it, all right? Okay, let's keep it going. So that's the other tip. Now, how do we save this as a preset? Let's say we didn't want to have our presets saved as kick, baby. Let's just delete these right here, these samples, because everything that's going to be saved on that track would appear. So what we're going to do here, we're going to right click and we are going to save as default audio track. And I'm not going to click this right now because I have a slightly different one already saved for myself, but just double check that all of your automations are deleted here. By the way, you want to return everything to default because, again, any kind of changes that you've made on your plugins will be printed every time you open up this new default track again. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure everything is default here. and then we're going to right click on the track name, and at the very bottom we're going to save it as default audio track. So then every time you're going to press Control T or Command T, you're going to have the same exact track printed. Now that's out of the way, mine is called New Track, and you can see it here. Mine is the same thing except it has a Pro Q3 in the middle. All right, step 4B, we're just going to hit Control Shift T or Command Shift T on our Mac, and we're going to open up a MIDI track, and we're going to do the same thing. On a MIDI track, I want the exact same layout, so I'm just going to do that right here except with a Pro Q3, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to save as default track. A default track already exists. Do I want to override it? Yes, I do. You can only have one default track of each kind, by the way. All right, so just as an overview, we have learned hotkeys. We've labeled our tracks. We have color-coded our tracks. We are creating a default audio track. We have created a default MIDI track. And now we're going to set a default template, okay? Templates are beautiful. You can have multiple templates, as many as you want, actually. We're going to create a predetermined loop point. Let's say the first 4 bars right over here. So everything's going to be nice and ready for us, nice and juicy. So this is the bonus tip before we create our default template. We are going to create a return track. So the way that we're going to create a return track is Control-Alt-T, and let's create at least 2 return tracks. We're going to do this for time-based effects. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to search for a reverb. So let's say a hybrid reverb is going to go on return track A, and let's say a delay is going to go on return track B. There we go. And returns, we're going to go into greater detail in the future of what return tracks are, but for now just think of them as a place where all of your signals can go to have this signal applied to them. Okay, that's as basic as we're going to get over here. So we have these 2 return tracks. That's part of our default template. And on the master track, which is where all of these tracks sum up, they all travel like little train tracks and they go to the master. And now on the master, I want you to search for spectrum. Spectrum is a waveform analyzer. And so we're just going to be able to see what it looks like and make some sort of judgment calls there. The next thing we're going to search for is a limiter. A limiter will control the peaks of your audio as it's going to the master. So we can enable here the ceiling to be -0.3 dB. So this limiter will do its best to, in case you're about to clip, it'll push things down as they approach -0.3 dB. Okay, so that's it. We're going to press File. And we're going to go to Save Live Set as Template. And boom, right here, we're going to call it Basic Template. Hit Enter. And that's it. It's saved. Now, if we wanted to create this as our default set, so we just save live set as default set right over here, and that would mean every time we open up Ableton Live, we see this right here. We see this screen. And boom. These are the first steps of you getting acclimated and making Ableton Live feel like your home. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to So Sound Studio. We are about to incorporate a lot more lessons, production tips, songwriting philosophy. We're going to go through the entire gamut. We're going to explore different bands and different styles. So if you love music, like I do, subscribe, give it a like, drop us a comment, let us know if this has been helpful for you. Follow us on socials. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram. We're going to have little tidbits here and there coming up. All right, I'm Ed. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you learned something. I hope it's helped. There's going to be some videos here for you to click on. And thank you so much for spreading the love. Keep it going. My heart out to y'all. Much love. Respect. Peace.